Did Jin and Yuna actually have children? If they did, who are they? What happened to them? If they didn't, how can we explain the drawings up in Jin's attic? Childlike in nature with Yuna's aged and very rusted out knife nestled right underneath it. Did the two of them manage to come to Ezo together? Is there a possibility that Jin really wasn't ever truly alone here? Or if he was, how can we possibly explain these drawings, Jin's burial, or even the lack of any other additional burials, like Jin's supposed children or even Yuna herself? Full transparency, this is a follow-up video to Jin's legacy if you want to check that video out. Here, I'm going to tackle some questions that still remain from that previous video, as well as something I kept seeing pop up quite a bit, which I'd like to address from the get-go, which is Oyuki being one of Jin's children, or even a descendant. This is an interesting point because she is very well versed with the legend of the first shinobi, which, as you know, is ultimately Jin's legacy going from Ghost of Tsushima to Ghost of Yotei.
An unsent letter from Doljin to Saito about Wolfsbane. He claims it stopped the Mongol invasion.
A legend passed down through shinobi clans that Doljin latched onto. It was centuries ago.
Whenever actually directly saying Jin's name, there's a few reasons as to why the idea of her being either one of Jin and Yuna's children or even a direct descendant of Jin is such an attractive idea. She is well aware of the first shinobi's legend. She's also extremely knowledgeable on Wolfsbane, the very poison Jin used against the Mongols, and the same poison the current Kitsune and the Nine Tails are harvesting under the belief that it is the edge they've been needing all along to turn the war against Clan Matsumai and the Shogun in their favor. If we take all of that into consideration at face value, her being a potential child or even a descendant does make sense. No one else seems to even come remotely close to her amounts of knowledge on this exact poison or even the story of the shinobi that she appears to be a little dismissive about. As she says, it's an old wise tale that's been passed down from shinobi clans over the years. However, when you take other factors into consideration, it is extremely unlikely. The biggest one of which is, of course, the time gap. Centuries, hundreds of years have came and went between Jin's death here on the island of Ezo to the beginning of Ghost of Yotei. Even if we go back 10-15 years, Oyuki being their actual child wouldn't make any sense. As far as being an actual descendant goes itself, it does hold weight until you listen to Oyuki's own story. When she tells Atsu the background of her becoming the Kitsune, she says her entire family was in servitude to Clan Saito. Clan Saito was part of mainland Japan. This could be where things do get a little murky again though. If you dive into the references made throughout the game, such as Atsu being a part of the Battle of Sekigahara, and Lord Saito and the Yotei 6 all taking part of the Battle of Nagashino, it's fair to say while the events and characters may be fictional, the framework of this game does have some historical grounding to it. And that's important because the notion of shinobi, let's call them operatives, wouldn't appear until about the 14 or 1500s, still centuries after Jin's death, or at least 50 plus years. This gives us two options here. Oyuki could be the actual descendant in one way. In Jin's own tale, they even say he disappeared for a period of time where no one really knew where he went, and even then, while they thought he ended up on Ezo, it wasn't confirmed until Atsu found his grave. If we even pay close attention to the storyteller at the beginning, he even says there's multiple legends and he doesn't know what the actual story really is, only to find out after Atsu confirmed the version that somewhat appeared to be true. This could mean that yes, he might have had children or had some kind of family on the island of mainland Japan, which was Yuna's original destination. So in that context, it's still quite possible. Or there's the alternative. The clan Oyuki grew up in just accepted themselves as ideological heirs or even claimed spiritual descendants from the first shinobi without actually sharing Jin's bloodline. And as we'll continue to talk about this, let's not forget the legend of the ghost traveled much further and faster than Jin did, even during his life. Back in the game of Ghost of Tsushima, people were already hearing stories of the ghost and his incredible achievements, but didn't know who that person really was until Jin came along. So that too is an element that I think a lot of people are forgetting, both on mainland Japan and even on the island of Ezo. In Tsushima, I mean, if you look back at some of these tales, Jin is wrestling with the idea of how people are even perceiving him. He doesn't want people to be afraid of him, and at the same time, he doesn't want people to disobey the samurai, the established order, or even reject or deny the shogun. At his core, he's still upholding the samurai ideal of protecting his people, but The ghost as a legend, as a myth, as this figure that symbolizes something so much more than just a single person, is just one of those elements that are just out of his control. But let me know what you think. Is Oyuki a descendant of Jin? Did she know so much about the first shinobi because of that? Do you think Jin even risked going to the mainland since he was branded an outlaw and a traitor, and hence going to the mainland would be at the heart and center of where the strength of the shogun resided? Which seems a little foolish because, if I'm not mistaken, it was also made quite apparent that with Jin being hunted, anyone else around him or associated with him would also be hunted as well. And if he did go to the mainland, that could also explain that he did in fact go to Ezo with someone, potentially Yuna, possibly someone else, or maybe he really was alone.
How long did it take Yuna to make this? I owe her everything. She's the one giving me gifts.
Yuna's knife, all the samurai armor, the medical poison sets you can find in his house, along with the iron hook and children's paintings found in the attic of Jin's home, are all various remnants that, when brought together, essentially paint the entire picture of what the ghost was. Now, at the end of Ghost of Tsushima, we see a part of Jin that could really explain some of this. In his exiled home at the end of that game, his house is filled with all sorts of trinkets. He has the hat of Rizo, his best friend turned traitor, the armor sets of Lord Shimura, Clan Sakai's banner, the iron hooks of Taka, and even Yuna's knife. Now, Jin does say that all of these gifts are given to him by Yuna, which is quite interesting considering Rizo's hat being handed to Jin. That in turn can give insight into the understanding Yuna had of Jin, seeing that he was in fact someone that was quite sentimental and would keep these things as a form of remembrance of the people closest to him, the things that they represented, and how they came to create the person he ultimately is at the end of the day. Now, Jin does say that he's getting all these gifts when you inspect a cricket in a cage, which he says, crafted herself, so it's quite possible he was just referring to that, and a generalization of just how Yuna has been acting, as opposed to Jin's gratitude for, as he says, owing her everything. So that would explain Yuna's knife, right? Jin had it at the end of the game and continued to hold on to it, possibly carving Yuna's name into it as a combination of remembrance and longing for a friend with possibly deeper feelings for her. Well then, what about the drawings, or even Jin's burial then? Clearly children have been here, and obviously Jin didn't bury himself, so who laid his body to rest? I'm going to be frank here, I still don't believe that it was Yuna. And trust me, I want that happily ever after just as much as anyone else does. But the reason I don't believe that it was Yuna, or that Yuna even came along with him, is what still stands out the most to me: the lack of any additional burial sites. Even if Jin passed before her, and the two of them did manage to have children together, would there not be any other signs of Yuna or anyone else staying here with Jin, beyond just Yuna's knife and this drawing? Or even then, if they all decided to just pack up shop and move on after Jin passed away, would Yuna and Jin's children not think it a good, honorable, and loving idea to lay their mother to rest besides either Jin or somewhere else on this property? Having children together and just abandoning him to the edge of the coast alone, albeit respectable given his headstone and the way they laid his body to rest, it feels kind of cold. So I'm still not entirely sold that Yuna came and that they had kids together. As beautiful of an idea and perception that might be, I'm just not buying it. So how would they explain Jin's burial then? How would they explain the children's drawings up in his attic? Well, it goes back to the whole myth idea. The perception of time is easily distorted when it comes to Jin, his house, and his feats back on Tsushima versus the story here on the Ghost of Tsushima. Remember, this is hundreds of years separating them. And we've already established, even Ghost of Tsushima established this, that Jin's feats, the ghost, the legends, the myths, all travel far and wide beyond him. So it's quite plausible people who have made it to Ezo before him, as well as the mainland and anywhere else that has either met Jin personally or heard from second, third, or even fourth-hand accounts, carry some piece of this legend or myth. Whether that be his defiance to the shogun, rejection of being a samurai, a being who's no longer human as he died on the beaches of Komoda, defied death, and annihilated an entire Mongol invasion, or a demon that had utilized this horrible poison to silently kill off his enemies. Ezo itself would have been an interesting place once Jin landed, because if you inspect his gear in Ghost of Tsushima, the description explains Jin stood on Tsushima until the second Mongol invasion 7 years later, meaning he would have been at the forefront of defeating two massive Mongol invasions on top of somehow successfully evading capture by samurai forces thanks to Shogun decree. It's yet another element that adds to the unfortunate nature of not seeing the second Mongol invasion or what happens to Jin after the Ghost of Tsushima, because if that's the case, the magnitude of Jin's legend would have been unimaginable at this point, increasing the likelihood of people of Ezo hearing about this person. Little bits and pieces here and there, but they're aware of his achievements to a degree. So while we are examining the house of a recluse, we could be seeing his final days, his final year, or even, yes, the way that he lived in a quiet, isolated area on Ezo, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he wasn't a part of the locals' lives. Ezo was untamed. It wasn't fully under Japanese control yet. In fact, to oversimplify this, the story of the Ghost of Yotei sees Japanese control starting to gain a foothold through Clan Matsumai. However, during the time Jin would have landed on this island, it would have been even more primitive. There was nothing more than sparse settlements of Japanese fishers and merchants, but mostly Ainu territory governed by local chieftains and animist traditions. So no, he wouldn't have been known by name. His name would have been long dead by that point anyways, considering it was outlawed by the shogun. But here's another piece that's kind of overlooked. His armor, his speech, his mannerisms. That would have given him away immediately as someone from the south. Even his swords would have drawn attention. A ronin, an exile, a shamed samurai. And that's very believable because during the Iki Island DLC, the way he spoke gave him away to Tenzo.
You weren't looking so good. I let you rest.
Who are you? Answer me.
You're used to talking that way to people on Tsushima, but not here, samurai.
I don't even know if you're real.
Draw your blade. Find out how real I am.
To be fair, he is a little bit more on the aggressive side here when it comes to his first interaction with Tenzo. And of course, I am wearing Gusaku armor, but the game never takes into account what you choose Jin to wear in terms of cutscenes or overall narrative. So even if you decide to go to Iki Island dressed up as the ghost or anything else, the way he speaks does give him away. And what about Jin's nature? Even in exile, Ezo itself would have been a place where he was essentially safe, and it would have been incredibly hard for him to stop helping people. So it's quite likely that he began by protecting isolated fishing villages or Ainu settlements from bandits, rogue pirates, even remnants of Mongol raiders or northern mercenaries. Through those actions, that could have very well have given him away as the ghost. He didn't need to say it. It could have been either when his strength waned or maybe from the get-go that he decided to settle in one place, a cabin at the base of Mount Yotei. Remote but near enough for the people he once helped in case they needed him. Even this quiet disappearance into the mountain could have also played into the idea of this spirit living among them. Mind you, the storyteller does share that there are different versions of Jin, his story and the myth that prevails. But I think it's within that version right there that we see those childlike drawings. It's not proof that Jin had children. They are children's drawings of the folklore they grew up with, whether if that folklore originated with the actual ghost story all the way back on Tsushima, or if it's the folklore that slowly grew into something beautiful here on the island of Ezo. Either way, it's the softer, more gentler, protective side of the ghost, where everyone else talks about this demon, this level of defiance, a person that moved like nobody else. The children honor someone that protected them. They live this quiet, peaceful life, and these drawings are a tribute, a different version of remembrance. When Jin died, it would have been quiet, natural, and unrecorded. The locals would have buried him themselves, but they would have kept visiting that place, lighting incense, leaving offerings, telling their children stories of the ghost who came from the south. That's how the legend survives without identity here on the island of Ezo. By the time Oyuki and the Kitsune trace his story centuries later, his name is long gone, completely stomped out by the shogun that outlawed it. But the myth remains, and was reshaped into the identity of the first shinobi. It's all intentionally vague and ambiguous, so I would love to hear your thoughts and opinions on all of this. Do you still believe Yuna and Jin had children? I'm not entirely against it, I'm just not someone that 100% completely advocates for it either. There's nothing else to really sell me on it. But at the same time, there's not enough concrete evidence to go in one way or the other, so I would love to hear your thoughts and opinions on all this, or even on Oyuki knowing so much about Wolfsbane and the origins of the first shinobi. In the meantime, consider subscribing. The next video we're putting out is going to be on the origins of Lord Saito. how he was sold off as a child himself, and how the symbol of becoming a tiger is something that was forged all the way back when he was a kid, and he held on to it and reforged it as the head of the Yotei 6.